The United Nations Elimination of Racial Discrimination CERD Committee, absurd, I think they should be calling it, has reported back. In actual fact, it reported back, Josh, about a week ago, but it's only just now started to make the news. I think in New Zealand. The report's been out for a week, but it only has been drawn to the attention. It's 14 pages, and for those of you who haven't read it, and I've taken the opportunity of of summarising it for you. But essentially it says that New Zealand is at risk. This is the one that Lady Turiti Moxon and others headed off to in Geneva, you know, and complaining about the fact that Maori in this country are an endangered species, basically. They're like the albatross, Josh, you know. And soon we're going to have to put them in reserves, Josh, with rather large fencing around them so that we can protect Maori and their culture. So they went off anyhow, Lady Moxon. Oh, by the way, she's got her lady title because she married somebody else. And she married a chap called Archbishop Moxon, who, as I understand, is white, actually came from England. So he was made a Sir. That's how she ended up Lady Moxon. And boy, does she trade on that title, I've got to be honest with you. Anyhow, but the CERD Committee, or ABSURD Committee, as it's probably better known, the United Nations one, the sort of bleating panel, has come out with a 14-page report in which it says that, and I like the terminology, that New Zealand seriously risks weakening the legal, institutional and policy framework for the implementation of the UN CERD Charter. There you go, the elimination of discrimination. The committee, quote unquote, was concerned with the misrepresentation, and listen to this one. The committee was concerned with the misrepresentation of affirmative action to address structural discrimination as racial privilege by some political and public figures. Now, this was their primary concern. They were concerned with the misrepresentation of affirmative action, we all know what that is, to address structural discrimination, as racial privilege, those people who call it racial privilege, by some political and public figures. So, Josh, I didn't realise that I'd been included, albeit obliquely, in a United Nations report, because I've been arguing that only for 30 years, and I guess I'm a public figure. Listen, positive discrimination, and so I'm going to say to the United Nations CERD Committee, based in Geneva, the elimination of racial discrimination, can I tell you now? Please, quote me directly, and because they're expecting a report from the government about how they're going to deal with this. People, public figures like me saying that. Isn't that extraordinary? They are expecting a response now, and they're demanding a response from the New Zealand government to address the issues that they've raised, including that one. So, because I am a public figure, I'm assuming that the New Zealand government is either going to have to run tackle for me, or alternatively apologise for me at Geneva at some time in the very near future. So I just want to say to the CERD Committee in the United Nations, here we go. Positive discrimination doesn't work. Okay, here we go. Number one. Oh, you can just watch them. They're taking that enlarge and take a breath at Geneva at the moment. It doesn't uplift Maori. It never has, and it never will. All right. All it uplifts and rewards is the privileged few who didn't need it anyhow to succeed. And it also introduces racial inequity, that's called unfairness, into the apportionment of government resources and particularly employment opportunities. There you go. So I hope there's a public figure in New Zealand having a go at the misrepresentation. Well, I'm apparently misrepresenting affirmative action. What do you think? I would suggest to you that I've just described it perfectly for what it is, and it's being abandoned all over the Western world, except apparently in Geneva. The other extraordinary thing about this United Nations Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination report is that the people who composed it come from countries where there is racial discrimination on an industrial level from those particular nations. But anyhow, expecting, and this was the three items that they particularly highlighted as somehow examples of discrimination against Maori. Number one, and it was the first example, Josh, boot camps. What? Boot camps are apparently a fine example of discrimination against Maori. Now let me get this right. You take a whole series of little scroats who are headed for major scrotdom, and you actually try and shock them into becoming decent people through using the boot camp, and you hope that this will arrest their future criminal offending, given the fact that they've come from largely dysfunctional families and largely criminal families and are out of control in terms of their personal behaviour anyhow. So that boot camp, now listen, I don't think they'll work, just quietly, and I've got no time for boot camps, not on the basis that they are discriminatory, on the basis that I don't think they'll work, and I think there's plenty of evidence in my quarter on that one, and what a waste of money. Just, I'm a bit of a throw the scroats behind some form of barbed wire and leave them there sort of person. But there you go. I understand that you don't want to do that just yet. The second thing was the Section 7AA removal from the Oranga Tamariki legislation. That was the second case that the third committee said, look at this dreadful racial discrimination in New Zealand. Really? This is the one that says that if you're Maori and you're being abused as a child, we'll put you back into the same dysfunctional family that you came from. We just won't put you with that dysfunctional part of the whānau. We'll put you with that one. Because, well, we need you to be Maori first. And if being Maori means being abused, that's good enough for us. Section 7AA, I've just summarised, I think, of the Oranga Tamariki Act, and that's why we got rid of it. And the third one was the disestablishment of the Maori Health Authority, which I've got to be honest with you, has covered itself in glory, hasn't it? Because it wasn't working at delivering or uplifting. It's now we are still having serious problems with Maori health authorities all over New Zealand apportioning resources for their own personal use, making piggy burrows from the Hater Community School or campus in Christchurch look like a positive beacon by comparison. And those are the three big examples of racial discrimination that the United Nations Convention or the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination could bring up against New Zealand. And somehow also public figures like me are meant to be stopped by this government from uttering the heresy that positive discrimination is just racial discrimination by any other guise, and it just advantages the favoured few and pisses everybody else off and doesn't uplift Maori at all. But there you go. The government's got to report back. They're demanding, the committee, that the government reports back to it as to how it's implemented its, i.e. this Geneva Committee's recommendations, especially regarding environmental protection. Who knew that environmental protection and racial discrimination were connected? They are for this committee. The over-representation of Maori in justice system. Listen, can I just say to the committee, there's a really good way to stop the over-representation of Maori in the justice system. Do you know what that is? More Maori need to stop criminally offending. End of story. There you go. It's a personal choice. They can either criminally offend or not. Let's get them not, eh? Just saying. And the strengthening of Maori land rights. And I have to say at this point in time, given that Maori land rights are now moving into the whole series of private land in this country with more and more claims, I wouldn't have thought it needed too much strengthening, but there you go. It is an absurd report. It condemns the United Nations as an irrelevant, hand-wringing bunch of liberals living in, I have to say, moneyed splendour in Geneva, one of the most expensive places in the world to live. Lovely scenery, though, of course. And listening to a whole group of people who bleat their way to visit them, sends out a report of 14 pages and then demands of the government, because we know we've got some sort of moral authority, that you report to us. This is the United Nations, and the reason why it is no longer a functional organisation, or at least it's a symptomatic illustration of why it's no longer a functional organisation. It's the reason why everybody ignores it. It's the reason why we shouldn't be involved. It's a bit like, I guess, in a funny sort of way, local government New Zealand and all the councils that have left local government because they're going, nah, we can do it better ourselves. Well, just about every country in the world can. And it's composed of a whole series of bureaucrats have risen to a very high level of functionality where they can rip off the rest of the world to pay for their glorious lifestyles and turn out meaningless reports from groups of people who, if they looked in their own backyard, or just over their left shoulder, for example, they would find all sorts of calumny, but we don't want to talk about that. We'll just take the paycheck from the UN, thanks. Appalling report.